And I guess the only way we can try to do it is get more and more people to hear this stuff until they finally do realize the root problem is the way our monetary system works. Hemphill made it the clearest of anybody. It's the most important thing, an important subject that intelligent people can think about. And they better start thinking about it. And they better start doing something about it instead of just sitting around doing nothing and thinking, well, tomorrow somebody else will have the answer. And that's the way I look at this. You know, a long time ago when I started to get into this, I said to myself, well, if you can't say and show there's a better way to do it, what right do you have to complain? And really what happened is, when they changed our money from gold and silver to banknotes, they actually changed our money from evidence of wealth to evidence of debt. Now, you don't have to use gold and silver to have money representing wealth, but that's the two principles. Money can either represent wealth or it can represent debt. Money is nothing but a medium exchange. It's just something that you use to make barter simpler. That's all it is. John Maynard Keynes said the surest and subtlest way to destroy the basis of any society is to balk its currency. It engages all the hidden forces of economic law in decided destruction, and it does in a manner that not one man in a billion will ever diagnose. And what that means is, and the only way you can debauch currency is change it from evidence of wealth to evidence of indebtedness. And that's what they've did to our currency, and of course you can clearly see that's exactly what it's doing. It's just destroying this nation. I mean, everything is just going to rack and ruin. Yet the people have been as productive as any people in any time in the world, history of the world, that we've been as productive. Now this bill here is a silver certificate. And it says right on the face that this certifies there is a deposit in the Treasury of the United States, $1 payable in silver on demand. Now, of course, what it meant was they went under the 1792 Coinage Act, and in other words, there had to be 371 1/4 grains of silver deposited in the Treasury for them to issue this certificate. So what they did is when any gold or silver came in from another country, and there was a lot of it in bullion and there was a lot of it in coins, different kinds of coins. So what they did is they took them to the mint, and then they weighed them and assayed, and then they paid you. They gave you a dollar certificate if it was 371 1/4 grains. You know, they give you one if it was more. So then that's how the silver certificate converts to circulation. And then we have a gold certificate, which is basically the exact same thing, only they put a gold seal on it, gold colors. But it's the same thing. It says this certifies there has been deposited in the Treasury of the United States $10 in gold coin payable to bearer on demand. Now this is national currency. Abraham Lincoln in 1863 established the national banking system. And so that's why this has a national currency on it. And there is one thing that was very good about this kind of currency, is because they did a study in the early 1800s, and they determined that we had the most uniform currency or money system of any country in the world had ever had, because all your bills were uniform. Now, when Jackson shut down the second central bank, then they took out all the uniform currency that flowed from the central bank, and all went to state bank currency. And then all your currency was issued by individual state banks. Well, then they all had different colors, different weights, different sizes, different shapes, and so it was very confusing. It was just like trying to buy a used car. What's a used car worth? And they actually developed what they called the Blue Book, which was just like a used car book, that actually listed all the currencies they knew about and assigned a value to them. So when the merchant come in, and you come in maybe with a state bank note from some other state or some other place, and I come in with a different one, well, they'd look through their book and see how much good they should give you for each one. Just like you go to the used car book, to see what the value of used car should be, high mileage or low mileage or whatever. And then, as you saw originally, all these bills, this one here was issued by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and it said the Federal Reserve Bank of New York will pay to the bearer on demand. Now see, this was nothing but a promise to pay. They wasn't giving you the silver, the gold, and nothing else. They was promising to pay you, but these would never back by more than 25% gold. I mean, they never had the full amount. They never could have actually give you the the actual dollars. And of course, remember, the dollar here was called the 17. Was by law was 370 1/4 grains of silver or 24 point something, I think, grains of gold. I can look that up. I don't have that on top of my head. And so that's what the dollar was. But nobody ever traded with them. They didn't loan them. They didn't even have them to loan. They just loaned you the promise to pay. Well, then as time went on, we'll see again, here's the national currency note. Now this tells it just like it is. It's secured by United States Certificate of Indebtedness or United States 1-year gold notes deposited in the Treasury of the United States of America. And it says on its face, the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis, Minnesota will pay to the bearer on demand $1. We begin to really see some changes in the bills here, because now all of a sudden you notice, now this one says Federal Reserve note. Now these were issued and came into circulation after 1913 when they established the Federal Reserve banking system. And now the notes have changed. They no longer says the issuing bank will pay. It says United States of America will pay to the bearer on demand $10. So what we have now is a promise to pay by the United States that actually the bank issued, but the United States agreed to pay it, make it good, not the bank. And we know which bank this was because it says Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis, Minnesota, right on the bill. And then we had the next change in the bill, and it's still a Federal Reserve note. Still says the United States of America will pay demand on the demand $10. And it says this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private, and redeemable in lawful money. But they won't tell you what lawful money is anymore. At the United States Treasury or any Federal Reserve Bank. And now we go on down, and each one of these are $10 bills. It still says Federal Reserve note, United States of America, will pay to the bearer on demand $10. This note is legal tender for all debt, public and private. Redeemable in lawful money at the United States Treasury or at any Federal Reserve Bank. Now that says exactly the same thing, except it's 3 lines instead of 4 in a lot smaller print. Now you go down, and in 1963, Kennedy started issuing these. President Kennedy, it says this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. Still says Federal Reserve note, United States of America, but no promise to pay. They now say that this is not a promise to pay, it's just the $10. So from here, it used to be a promise to pay. Now it's not even a legal promise to pay. It's not even a legal negotiable instrument because a negotiable instrument by law has to have a promise to pay written on its face. Otherwise, it's not a negotiable instrument. But yet, these are negotiable instruments because we can use them to trade anything with, can't we? Mm-hmm. You can do anything with them. And that's how they changed their money from wealth to debt. And then you hear so many people talk about these are the United States notes that Lincoln issued also in 1863. Well, now, I don't understand. If you could issue a United States note that said would pay to the bearer on demand, now this says $2, why would you go borrow the money from the bank and let them issue the money at interest and still be the one that promised to pay it? It doesn't make sense. And these went into circulation a little bit different because, see, the United States does have the power to tax. I mean, it was given in the Constitution, and that's the first thing Hamilton did was set up taxes. But when they got ready to fight the war, they didn't have the money. So in order to get the money, they printed up these notes and then went out and said, okay, I need this wagon, I need this, whatever, to prosecute the war, pay for soldiers, whatever, and they issued them and said, okay, now you can take these and we'll make them legal tender. And at first they was a full legal tender. In other words, they would pay for anything you wanted. I mean, they'd pay interest on the debt. They would buy any, legal tender any place. And then when they come back to pay the taxes, you could use them to pay the taxes. And then if they paid the taxes, they went out of circulation. The tax was considered paid, and the government didn't have a debt anymore, did it? And that would have worked. It's not the best money system because even under this system, somebody still has to be in debt to have any money. With gold and silver, nobody had to be in debt to have any money. Now that's the difference between wealth money and debt money. But let's go on. Now these are United Federal Reserve notes, $2 bills. And now this note is legal tender for all debt, public and private, just like United States notes. And now it says United States of America, $2. There's no promise to pay there, like there was here. And this is the Federal Reserve note. But the United States is still going to make it pay, but now you had to borrow this at interest to get this. Now here's the interest to get this. Now here's the United States notes, and this is what Kennedy actually did. He took the promise to pay off the United States note too. And actually, that would have then been money because there was no promise to pay. It was $2, and it just says United States of America, $2. So if we actually printed this kind of money and took off the word note, this would be currency. It would be final payment. It would be the money, and you wouldn't have to pay a dime of debt. Nobody would be in debt, not the government, not the user, not anybody, and you'd have the currency. Now, if the government printed these up and we built our infrastructure, roads and bridges, as Obama's talking about now, and of course he said, but of course the government's got to be in debt. Why? If you can print up your own currency, you don't have to be in debt, do you? Nobody has to be in debt. And if you issue it in lieu of taxes, think of the benefit the people got. Now they have the roads and bridges and the infrastructure that basically runs the country, which you need to run a country. You can have commerce without money. But you cannot have commerce without transportation, can you? Because if you and I can't get to each other or can't move the freight to each other, we can't have any commerce. So commerce is the most basic thing, transportation, to the whole system of commerce, the whole system of runs a nation's economic system. And if the government printed up their money and spent it to do that, they wouldn't need to have any taxes to have those built, and the money would then flow into circulation all over the country at the exact same time to the individual that did the work first, and then flow into the, when you spent it, when someone worked for the, help building a road, and there's all kinds of things that go into building roads. There's all kinds of well, you got to have engineers, you got to have people design it, you got to have people, the inspectors, you got to make sure that the pack is correctly right, to hold the weight and the right kind of soil, you know, for the right kind of soil, and all these things go into building roads and bridges and stuff. So all these people being employed all over the country, rebuilding our infrastructure, and then as soon as they got paid, most of them go home and buy a beer, and on the way home, and go home and give, and then start using the money to pay bills, don't they? So then that money would flow into circulation just exactly the same way when you get a loan. The first you do go out and start spending it, don't you? And that money goes to wherever you spent the money for. You might even go have a beer to celebrate your, you know, you're getting the loan, and then you go out and start spending, you know, spending the money for whatever you got the loan for. This would work the exact same way, but you would have no debt whatsoever, and you wouldn't need any taxes either. Now, what more could you want? Now, here is the perfect monetary system. It monetizes the production of the people. It's all based on wealth with no debt and no taxation. There is not anything better. If every nation did this, we would probably have peace and prosperity in the entire world. They wouldn't have all these wars trying to get somebody else's property, because they could all benefit from the actual production they produced. And every nation has raw materials. So they have people who can think and people who can work, don't they? The principle would apply internationally, and you'd have the perfect international money system that would all be individually issued by the countries. Each country would have its own sovereignty and its own money, but the money would have the exact same value any place in the entire world, because it would be based on the exact same principles. And I think this is the bill I was looking for. Yeah, see, as soon as the bankers saw what the government, what Lincoln was doing, they rushed right in, and about 6 months after they issued those others, the full legal tender, they passed this one here. Now they changed the wording on the note. This note is legal tender at its face value for all debt, public and private, except duties on import and interest on the public debt. No, the banker said, we got to get together. We can't stop this. You can't print up your own money to pay our interest. That's got to stop. And then he went into counterfeiting about you couldn't counterfeit the bill. But the really important thing is all of a sudden, whoa, whoa, whoa. We can't have the perfect monetary system, because now we won't get interest on our promise to pay you that didn't cost us anything. It only cost you. But in the process, it turned all the people's property over to the banks. Because when you issue all money as a promise to pay, you have no risk, but you still get the interest. The interest can't pay because all the money only comes in as principal. So, but yet, when the interest kicks in, your debt grows, but your money supply does not, and therefore, you can't possibly everybody get out of debt. Now, I had this conversation with Robert Ewald personally in the Federal Reserve boardroom in Washington, D.C., and he said, yes, Mr. Dale, you're right. As an individual, you can get out of debt, but collectively, we cannot. So, collectively, we have to get deeper and deeper in debt every year. And the next generation has to get deeper in debt than the last one to keep the system going until in point in time And it happens to every borrower in time. If you keep borrowing, in time the debt will get so large that the interest alone will be greater than the total consumer income. And we may be at that point right now. If we're not, we're just only a few short years away from it. And so this system cannot get better. It can only get worse. And think of the actual, what we talked about before with General Motors. Now, the senator clearly said their problem was too much debt. The answer was to give them a $17.7 billion greater loan. Now, how in the world is that going to induce their indebtedness, and how is that going to reduce their interest load? Because now that new debt is going to also draw interest, isn't it? Now, they're going to have to add that to their cost of business already. So they either got to cut the labor to beat the Dickens, because nobody seems to ever want to cut the banker out, and yet the banker does absolutely nothing for the money. It's just a promise to pay, and actually based on your promise to pay and your promise delivers the future production to him. And that's just it's a non-sustainable, non-workable monetary system. So if we really care about ourselves, our country, our kids, or anything else, we will start addressing this problem, and we will really start studying this, and then demand we have a workable, sustainable monetary system. We have a lot of talk about green, green, invest green, do green, sustainable environment. Well, it's just as important and probably more important to have a sustainable money system, because nobody I know wants to drink dirty water or breathe unclean air, but it takes money to clean those things up. If your money is short, so short, and your cost of doing business is so great because of your interest and taxes, there is simply no way that you can possibly pay for all these other things that needed paid for. But if you eliminate the interest and taxes, just think of how much more your paycheck would be if you got the same paycheck you got right now, plus all the interest and taxes they take out before they give it to you. Your disposable income would be a lot greater, wouldn't it? And see, we have to think about all these principles, and money is like anything else. It has to run on a certain set of principles. And you can have principles that turn out good product, or you can have principles that turn out faulty design products, don't they? That doesn't work as well. And that's exactly what we got. And I think this is where we really ought to stop for today. And we need to really think about this, and then we need to come back and go through some of these things again another time.
Discovered one thing: we're owned. We're property of these people. The Fed caused the Great Depression.
And he said they wouldn't do it again.
I believe is going to be far worse than the Great Depression.
There is evil. Bernie.
1913, the Federal Reserve Act was passed. 20 years later, 1933, under Roosevelt, the United States was declared bankrupt. And in 1933, the Federal Reserve private bank says, okay, USA, what are you going to pledge as collateral on the debt you owe me? What happened by 1936? Does anybody know? We instituted Social Security system, and you and I and our children and our children's children were pledged as collateral on the debt of our government to the Federal Reserve.
I'm taking a look at this, and it says U.S. Department of Commerce over here. Point to it, right over there.
Yes, that's what states right on there. And these days they were candid enough, they went ahead and put it on. I think they've now left it off, but they are still doing it.
So there's a certain value placed on the citizens of this country.
Effectively, what they're doing is they're making a claim on our future labor. And then effectively, this is a membership in the great United States corporation, and this is our membership in it.
Would it be incorrect to say they want it all?
Oh man, I think that's a fair statement.
In 1913, the money power of the country was taken away from the people. By constitutional privilege, it belongs with the Congress, but it was given up in the Federal Reserve Act. The Federal Reserve is no more federal than Federal Express, but yet it has the power to determine the direction of use of money in our economy. If we could take that power back and put the Federal Reserve under Treasury, we start to be in a position of being able to control monetary policy on behalf of the United States people.
I think any grade school kid can figure this out, that if you're in debt and you're having trouble paying off the first debt, you don't solve it by going deeper into debt, unless you've got some magic plan of some way to get the money.
If you add up all of the federal debt that each American household now owes $546,668. That is up 12%, or $55,000 from last year. That's 4 times what each U.S. household owes in car loans and credit cards, mortgages, and all other debt combined. Keep in mind, that's the happy estimate.
This business of going deeper and deeper and deeper into debt has been going on now for about 100 years. And I think the politicians should have figured out that they're not going to get any more money next year. They just keep going deeper into debt. Grade school kids can figure this out. It's only the politicians and the political pundits that have a little trouble with that.
I want to inspire every one of you to go back to your homes and your communities, wherever you come from, and wake up your neighbors and make them understand that this is the greatest adversity this country has ever faced. Far greater than Tojo and the Japanese, far greater than Adolf Hitler, far greater than any strategic threat that this country has ever faced. This failed experiment with the privately owned central bank, the Federal Reserve, must come to an end.